Just how was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs created? And how are the famous Disney short films made? To give you the answer, we take you behind the closed doors of the famed Walt Disney Studio in Hollywood. Doors usually...
Animation is an interesting subject. Not only is it a focal point that became prevalent in films as far back as the early 20s, but it also has a long-winded history of evolution. Today I don't really want to talk about animation as a passing genre. I've showed my love for general animation in the past by presenting the works of anime and expressed my love for that specific category of animation. I think I've mentioned that my love for anime stems from the fact we end up with more experimental content that feels genuinely artistic in a shorter period of time. And because of how large and diverse anime extends across subgenres, more of these genuinely touching abstract stories are made possible. These types of shows and shorts don't tend to do that well with the general public, which can often get quickly distracted by the lack of surface level meanings to be extracted from such stories or their lack of tangible elements. I'd say dubious characteristics applied to the animation style and the art style can also be of blame to that, but that's not the point. I tend to enjoy weird and surreal imagery more than any other Joe of the day, so this type of things are right up my alley. Heck, my entire channel is 90% based on obscure video games and shows. So I decided relatively recently to go into my own country's history with animation, which, similar to a lot of other Eastern European countries, had undergone an animation spree of sorts in its early years, but as time went on, the animation scene continued diminishing until it basically went extinct. I'm not saying that no animation came out after the revolution in 1989, but that was one of the determining factors which led Romania to stop producing entirely animated movies, till a bit later on, but we'll discuss that aspect later. Let's rewind time all the way back to the beginning, to the inception of animation in Romania. Like everywhere in the world, the Romanian animated industry was born through the development of journalistic graphics and drawings done for newspapers. Most of them were influenced by the aesthetic ideal of the American and French studios stealing their jobs, many times after watching their productions at the cinema. The following period, spanning between 1920 and 1948, would come to be known as the pioneering period, in which Romanian animation was still at a relatively early point, where most of the creations were either based on books or folklore and lacked a lot of the animation. They were quite primitive movies and shows that functioned as a gateway to inspire other people to create. The most important person of this time has to be Aurel Petrescu, who ended up creating the first animated movie in Romania. Things wouldn't kick off into action properly until 1949. This period was dominated by the personality of Ion Popescu Gopo, who was still in his beginnings but would end up being one of the most influential people of Romanian animation, because he would end up being the catalyst that would form the Anima Film Studio in 1964. His works were internationally awarded, and as such he was put in charge of the studio. Under Popescu Gopo's leadership, Anima Film Studio flourished and became a hub for creative minds. The studio produced a diverse range of animated films, blending artistic expression with social commentary. Popescu Gopo's films like A Brief History showcased his distinctive style, combining humor, satire and visual innovation. Although his influence can be denoted as important, I think someone else claims the spot as the most influential animation director at the time. One of the Anima Film employees, Victor Antonescu. Victor was an interesting person, as he was essentially the person that ended up creating one of the first science fiction movies from Romania at that time. The film in question was called Delta Space Mission and was a continuation of the series of the same name made by his team. The movie has a kind of early Star Wars feel to it, but the atmosphere and general themes tend to be more light-hearted. It is a very weird movie, and I mean it in the best ways. The movie looks and feels like a fever dream. The animation is fluid only sometimes, while keeping this very peculiar style of rotoscoping for human-like characters that makes them feel like they are moving in slow motion. It does some very interesting things with the way angles are portrayed, but one of its shortcomings is the fact most of these were hand-drawn and quite often induce a slight motion sickness. As for the drawings themselves, they look very 80s anime-esque, and I can't exactly put my finger on why exactly. I'm saying that because for some of the characters' faces they appear to have this uncanny traced human sort of expression, while others have their faces look like generic cartoons. It's at best very odd to watch, but ultimately still very entertaining. As for the plot, it's well, I'm going to say it's not exactly ideal. I'm going to show that by writing the following segment in the most Gen Z edited way I can, while I make fun of how stupid the line of thought of the writers were at times. You may argue that the writing may not be the main point, which is kind of right, but since they hired a scientist and a doctor to look at the script and help with accuracy, I'm thinking a bit of thought went into it at least, right? Right? In the not too distant future, humanity has established the Delta space station, a state-of-the-art research facility orbiting Earth, led by the brilliant scientist Dr. Elena Stellian. The multinational crew of the space station embarks on a groundbreaking mission to explore the uncharted regions of deep space. A reporter from another solar system named Alma arrives on the launch day of the space mission Delta. She meets up with Dan, a scientist, and his team of other individuals that work on the station. While Alma is there, she is shown the station's AI, called the Superbrain, at which point she remarks how it looks like a giant, marvelous gem that she'd want to keep for herself forever? At this point in the movie I was like, okay, so the alien woman loves the giant disco ball or something. What happens next is totally unexpected. They install the AI and it goes rogue. All its robots start attacking Alma. Eventually she is forced to crash land on a planet later in the movie, where to her rescue come Dan and Yashiro, two of the scientists from the station. As they traverse the planet, the trio encounters fascinating yet dangerous creatures, each more peculiar than the last, all the while being attacked by constant waves of robots like it's fucking Man vs Machine on TF2. Meanwhile, back on the Delta space station, Dr. Elena Stellian and the remaining crew members struggle to regain control of old Shodan over here. With the station system compromised and the robots running amok, they face a race against time to prevent further chaos and destruction. In the final act, Dan, Yashiro and Alma find themselves willingly captured by the rogue AI. Wait, what? But hold on to your seats, because here's where things get more interesting. As they face the AI's menacing presence, they go in without a plan, and brace yourself for this. They unknowingly let Alma's alien dog, Tin, chew on the power cable. That's right, this thing saves them. Last time a dog chewed something, it was my 3rd grade science diorama, and I can assure you that did not save the day. If that weren't enough, while all of this is happening, Dan, Yashiro and Alma engage in a dialogue that is part nonsensical gibberish and part profound musings about emotions. It's as if they're trying to confuse this ChatGPT fellow with a barrage of philosophical babble that they think might screw up its tiny little robot brain. Yeah, this movie is weird and not that good, but it has charm, it has substance, and the backgrounds and colors are gorgeous, so I'd say it's overall still worth a watch. Now, the next movie that was made by the same director only 2 years later is called The Son of the Stars, and this one is, I cannot believe this is not a Star Wars movie. Its plot revolves around another character named Dan, but that has nothing to do with the other movie. The plot revolves around 2 astronauts who live on a spaceship with their son Dan. They get a message from an astronaut named Andra O'Neill, who had been missing for decades, so they go in to investigate while pulling off the best parenting tactic, leaving your child in a hot car in summer. So of course the damn ship just fucking decides to crash into a jungle planet for some reason, and we're met with 2 races that inhabit this jungle planet, one of them being the Among Us and the other being the Starfish or something. So they teach Dan the Force or something, and he gets to time travel and fight a knight, and then the movie ends. What? I swear, what is with these people and their movies? To defend this movie even further, I think the animation is slightly improved from the last one by a bit, and they tend to introduce new concepts every single second to the point there is too much going on. Okay, calm down, it looks cool at least. Just move on from then and realize that these are flawed movies, but they have charm. It's not like they made your brain hurt. Oh, come on, there you go. I knew you could do it. Concentrate, brain, come on, you can. It's nice looking. It's decent. Yeah. So then, of course, the next step in animation is getting God damn it! What the heck is happening with the video? Oh my god, no, don't do this, don't. And I guess we just can't have good things. Not communism that objectively sucked in this country and everywhere else, but the animation studio died after the death of Ion Popescu Gopo in '89, right before the revolution, and after the revolution the studio lost government funding entirely. It all went bad from there, and we had what I'd like to call the 2 decades of silence in animation. While the previous section of the video was more on the funny side, the following one is quite grim. So I will ask a question. What would you define as a person's darkest moment? Is it their feeling of depression, the loss of people dear to them, even death? Death is the passing wind of tomorrow's meaning in a sea of utter blissful ignorance. The last moment when the wind blows and the last flute plays its sad melody as the notes fly over the setting sun. The moment their bed's blanket flies in the wind, reaching in time, reaching the void of nothingness. The death of an industry, the death of a loved one, the death of a man. Death seems to be an important subject in Anca Damian's life, which was a new and upcoming director back in 2009 who decided to delve into animation. In the same year, she became obsessed with the case of one particular man named Claudiu Crulic. Crulic was a Romanian who had apparently went on hunger strike while in arrest in Poland because he believed the crime he was accused for was one he did not commit. The thing is, this event, however, would lead to his death. This is where Anca stepped in. Wishing to show the cruelties committed, she dedicated 2 years of her life on covering Crulic's tragic death and the events that led to it. The film serves as a comprehensive case of Crulic's innocence, delving into the flaws of the legal system and the devastating consequences it can have on individuals. Now, this movie is depressing from the fact the story is as real as something can get. It's tangible, heartfelt, and the way the whole movie is written makes Crulic a very likable guy from the get-go. While this isn't necessarily a correct interpretation of the way he was in his life, it portrays a person through a certain lens, through their photos, their memories, and their loved ones' memories of them. It's a dark movie that has more meaning and substance than it appears to yield at first, and the way it's animated is akin to something Yuasa would make, mostly because of its experimental surreal counterparts to all of it. The movie paints a bleak and unflinching picture of reality, depicting the true story in a raw and authentic manner through the use of mostly black and white simple animation shots. It explores the depths of human suffering, highlighting the profound injustices that persist in society. It's a powerful film that frankly deserves to be explored, so I'll do that because, first of all, this movie might not even have a version where there are English subtitles for the entire duration out there on the internet, and second of all, I wish to bring attention to it. So I'm going to do a brief summary of the plot. From beyond the grave, Claudiu Crulic recounts how his mother and sister struggle to recognize his emaciated body. He appears far older than his 33 years, resembling someone closer to 70 due to the toll of his hunger strike. Crulic recalls his childhood and how he ended up living in Poland. He talks about how he had supported himself by buying goods and then selling them in Romania. In 2007, he was arrested for theft in Poland. At the time of the crime, he was not even in the country. He had gone to Italy. This resulted in him being falsely accused and jailed. Crulic's protests were dismissed and his pleas to the Romanian Council for help were fruitless, so he began a hunger strike. Prison doctors dismissed signs of his deteriorating health time and time again, and even claimed there was nothing wrong with him and that he was of perfect health. When they finally agreed to force feed him, they had to go through a lengthy trial and his health ended up being even worse by the end. During the operation, his lung was injured by a needle, which led to his death. This entire ordeal took 6 months. 6 months of insane suffering where nobody even batted an eye or attempted to defend Crulic. At the end, none of the doctors or prison guards took responsibility for his death. And his soul was rested. Darkness covered the realm, and everything went black.
Autoritățile române și poloneze desfășoară anchete în paralel în cazul Claudiu Crulic. Românul a murit în Polonia după ce a intrat în greva foamei în timp ce se afla în arest.
Zapaleniem płuc rozlanym osłuchowo z odmą opłucnową, objawami skazy krwotocznej pod postacią licznych wybroczeń krwawych na skórze całego ciała.
Robiliśmy wszystko z naszej strony, co było dane nam i zgodnie z przepisami, proszę pamiętać o przepisach, które nas obowiązują, jednak ten człowiek nie wykazał praktycznie żadnej dobrej woli do współpracy.
O echipă a Ministerului de Externe a fost trimisă la ambasada noastră de la Varșovia pentru a afla cum s-a reacționat în acest caz. Deocamdată nimeni nu-și asumă vreo responsabilitate, iar ministrul Adrian Cioroianu evită să răspundă întrebărilor până la finalizarea anchetei.
Nie byliśmy i to ja jedna nie byłam w ogóle w Polsce, a on to był do 10. 10 kupił bilet na Eurolas i przyjechał do Włoch, do mnie. Przez jeden wniosek, co Daniel pisał, bo chcieliśmy kamera. I oni to nie mieli żadnej kamera, nie mieli nas na kamery. I przez tego wniosek, co Daniel Crulic Claudiu napisał, to zaczął wszystko ta wojna.
Jak ktoś chce się rozstać z tym światem, to nie ma skutecznego mechanizmu ze strony państwa, żeby mu to uniemożliwić, żeby kogoś uszczęśliwiać na siłę i umożliwiać mu życie w sytuacji, kiedy on żyć nie chce.
Dziś jego wersja staje się prawdopodobna dzięki tej kobiecie. Sabina jest pilotem wycieczek. Wielokrotnie razem z Claudiu Cruliciem jako pasażerem jeździła do Włoch. Wspólny kurs odbyli także 10 lipca. To ważne, bo 11 zdaniem prokuratury Claudiu miał kogoś okraść.
Pan Crulic wsiadł jako jedyny na przystanku dworzec główny. Dojechał z nami do Włoch i dopiero we Włoszech wysiadł następnego dnia, czyli 11 lipca.
După acest apel la calm și după ce a calificat situația în două rânduri ca una excepțională și dramatică, Adrian Cioroianu a refuzat să răspundă la orice întrebare. Deși poate ar fi fost important de aflat, când a raportat ambasada României la Varșovia un incident petrecut cu 3 luni în urmă în centrala Ministerului de Externe sau de ce se trimite acum o echipă de control.
100% pewny, że ten pan był w autobusie.
Sprawa śmierci głodowej aresztowanego Rumuna musi być wyjaśniona, a winni muszą ponieść konsekwencje. Mówienie, że sam sobie winien albo że zawiodły procedury w XXI wieku w cywilizowanej podobno części Europy jest nie do przyjęcia. Jacek Gasin.
Ministrul Adrian Cioroianu și-a anunțat demisia aseară.
Este o demisie de onoare în strânsă legătură cu deznodământul nefericit al cazului cetățeanului român Claudiu Crulic, mort în Polonia. Și chiar dacă știu că din punct de vedere tehnic nu am nicio vină, totuși a fost în joc viața unui om.
Anka's next movies would end up becoming obsessed with the idea of death. Her works would always charge straight first into the dead main character aspect. From the war-filled environments of the Magic Mountain to her first really mainstream movie, Marona's Fantastic Tale. She's an all-around great director and I recommend you check out her works. This would mark, however, an endpoint to all of Romanian animation in terms of movies, as Anca started working outside the country for her movies. 2011 would mark the end of it. And with that, we've arrived at the end of Romanian animation as a whole. There are a lot of side projects and stuff that is not movie related, but I've decided not to cover those for time constraints. I might do a follow-up to this video if it does good enough. Anyways, I've been Luca, please subscribe and I'll see you next time. Bye!